Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to Tournament Talk. We are looking at some tournament rosters for all of the teams that have been spoiled in the Blood Bowl 2020 rulebook. Hopefully next year we can go back to playing tournaments nice and safely, but as you guys may know, all tournaments tend to have slightly different build rules. So what we're doing is we're looking at 1.1 million and 1.2 million lists for you. It is designed to give you an idea of what you can run. You can add 50k, take 50k off here and there, but also give you an idea of the kind of things you could be facing against next year. Also, we're going to touch on some key skills. Skills tend to be very diverse when it comes to tournaments as well, so there's no guarantee you're going to get as many as you want, but we will pick out some of the ones we think are the most important. Now, we are looking at a team that was added just before things slowed down, so not a huge amount of tournament running here for Old World Alliance, which means we kind of get to take a deep dive and explore ourselves, and we're going to be looking at Old World Alliance tournament rosters. So let's go straight in with the All Sorts 1100. So this roster comes in at bang on 1100. It's a very interesting team. There's quite a bit of animosity and things like that you need to consider. It's very similar to Renegades in that way. This roster here, you can take an Ogre or a tree. We've gone with the Ogre. If you take the tree, you save 20k or something like that, which could be used to bump up a player from one type to another. I will leave that to you to figure out. What we're going to do here is just give you an idea of what you can run quite happily at 1100, and we're expecting that 1100 is going to be one of the lowest tournament kind of limits out there, so it's good to check that out. So with this roster, you get one Ogre, one human blitzer, one human thrower, one human catcher, one slayer, one dwarf blitzer, two dwarf blockers, 4 human linemen and 2 halflings, along with 2 rerolls. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. 2 rerolls is not enough for this team. They've got some good players. They've got 2 block players. They've got 2 block blitzers basically, and you've got a thrower there who does come with sure hands. But you've got quite a lot of silliness going on. So you've got an Ogre, you've got halflings, and you've got dwarf blockers that are not the dwarf blockers that you remember. These guys have got armbar and brawler. So I'm a huge fan of brawler. On 2 dice with Black Orc blockers, and on 1 dice, it's going to take that 1 dice, and it's going to make it even more risky than it is on a dwarf team. I say even more risky. It's not that risky on a dwarf team. So one thing to remember is that all of these dwarves have got loner 3+ as well. So you're going to have to play very tight when it comes with using those dwarves. I think the dwarves and the big guys are the only ones who have got loner. So taking that 3rd reroll is going to be really important. And the best way to do that while saving 70,000 is to chuck it on the human thrower. Now the human thrower does have animosity to all dwarves and halflings. So passing game is realistically going to be limited, so you don't need to take a buff to give it a better passing game. You can give the thrower block instead to make him more resilient as your ball carrier, but taking leader unlocks the rest of your team and saves you 70k, and without that 70k, a lot more of these positional players are just linemen. And if you're going to be running a team that features mostly human linemen, you are much better off just running a human team. But we don't want to do that, that's boring. Very good in this season, but boring. So with this roster, the thrower is going to be key. He's your sure hands player, he's got leader to give you that 3rd reroll, and he's also got passing of 3+, not passing of 2+. So when I talked about passing game not being great because of animosity, it's also just not as good as the human thrower. However, a 3+ with a pass has still got a pretty good chance of success, and that is what this other player, the catcher, is here to take the opportunity for. So no animosity there, and this guy has got catch and movement 8 and comes with dodge. So it's not a bad catcher at all. This team, generally speaking, is a little on the slow side because you've got halflings and you've got dwarves in there. So having a catcher to run around and be your fast scorer is going to seriously help you out. The throw to catch, it's a 1 in 3 chance of going wrong with a reroll, and then 1 in 3 chance of going wrong with a reroll. So it's never going to be guaranteed, but a quick pass to a catcher is a pretty good opportunity for a stretch play. You've got the Ogre or Tree. So the Ogre or Tree, both of them benefit from if spending that double. This is a tier 2 team, so you're going to end up with some skills. Putting block on a big guy is never bad, and you've got strength 5 one here with Ogre with Mighty Blow and some solid movement. Or the Tree, both of them are realistically going to be lined up on that line of scrimmage for you. The Ogre makes a very good middle linebacker though, so there's always that option. Brawler on a single, if you don't want to use the double there, is going to do much the same except for when you're blitzing. Guard will help out. Now I see the line here being positioned with these 2 dwarf blockers, some human linemen if you want to go wider, and your big guy in the middle. So giving that Tree, for example, guard is going to allow your dwarf blockers to be able to maximize that brawler skill by rolling 2 dice, and that means they get to take that both down, re-roll it while still being okay. To add to that, you've got the opportunity to give strong arm to the Ogre if you want to maximize your throw teammate options. Because you've got 2 halflings here, the Tree does always come with strong arm, and then what you can do is give break tackle to the Ogre. It gives you +2 to dodging on strength 5 plus players, and the Ogre's got agility 4 plus. So it means that once per turn the Ogre makes a dodge on a 2 plus into open air. That is going to be very useful if you're able to, if you want to reposition him. And it's definitely worth thinking about. The human blitzer is always good if you can spend a double and give him blodge, because movement 7 blodge, strength 3 will do some tasty things. However, there is nothing wrong with going for guard on the blitzer. You can also use tackle to give him the ability to be your kind of safety and snipe gutter runners and things like that. It's a really interesting one. The human blitzer will benefit from whatever skill you give him. I would recommend on this team giving him dodge. That means you've got the blitzer and the catcher who can be your primary scoring threats, both with dodge. You can give the catcher block to keep it a blodge as well. And you've got 2 blodges, one's movement 7, one's movement 8. You can do a lot of stuff with that, and the human thrower doesn't suffer animosity, so you've got movement 6 followed by a cheeky 3 plus pass. There's a lot you can do there, and it's relatively safe and relatively fast. We've got some other great positionals. So the Dwarf Slayer makes a fantastic bit of removal. You've got the Ogre, who you can use as a mobile piece, but you've also got the Slayer. Now, why is the Slayer so good? He's got Frenzy. Okay, he's movement 5, but he comes with block as well. So giving him Mighty Blow to maximize that Frenzy, or Tackle to be your safety, you can smack him right in the middle of your backfield, and he's basically got all the squares covered. In fact, it's probably going to benefit you because you won't be frenzying around. Tackle will be really helpful, or Mighty Blow just to be in there smashing things. Now the Dwarf Blitzer can also be a deep safety, and you can chuck Tackle and Mighty Blow on him as well. It's a really interesting team. You've got a big guy. You've got some human players your human players are going to score the majority of your touchdowns. They're going to be your scoring element. You've got 2 solid combat pieces with the Slayer and the Dwarf Blitzer. I would use them both, one on each side of the pitch, doing a very similar thing. You could even give the Dwarf Blitzer Frenzy so that you kind of have 2 Slayers, but with the amount of rerolls and the fact that they are loner 3+, that is risky, but it is fun. On top of all of those positionals, you've got the 2 dwarf blockers. They don't have block, they have brawler, so kind of want to get them those extra supports. So I strongly recommend guard on these guys. On the defense, it's going to help them because they're going to boost their strength up, making blocking against them more difficult, and it's just going to make brawler be more effective when they're doing so. You can chuck block on there if you want to really just make them do stuff that's great, and the fact that they've got brawler as well means that if you go double both down, you can just take the brawler reroll on one of those dice and hope you get a POW, and if you don't, block is going to save you. That's only if you get 2 dice. So I would rather go with guard and just farm the dice out, because brawler doesn't use a reroll, which means loner doesn't count. And then you've got a couple of halflings. So the great thing about this team is that you've got a kind of bit of everything. Now the halflings are there for you to be able to have the throw teammate, but never underestimate the fact that they are stunty, 3+ dodge everywhere. 5 movement feels a little slow, but the majority of your team is kind of 6 movement, so they're about as fast as the rest of your team, which means you've got an option at throw teammate, but you've also got a couple of guys who are agile. You've got the human catcher there, but these guys are better at dodging. And then you can give them break tackle on a double, which makes them even better at dodging, because break tackle gives you +1 to dodges. We talked about it with the Ogre. Strength 5 plus gets +2. Strength 4 less gets +1. And the Halfling Hopeful for a double can take break tackle, giving it 2+ everywhere dodging. I'm so good with that. Failing that, you can make them sneaky and give them sneaky get for a cheeky fowler. So how many players are we looking at so far? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14 players on this roster. So you can drop a couple of human linemen, or you can drop a human lineman and a halfling and take that third reroll to release that skill. I like having strength in depth. What this does is it means you can lose alignment and you've got those halflings. Halflings don't massively count, and the downside of this roster is it is less cohesive, and you've got the catcher and the 2 halflings that are strength 2. So a little bit vulnerable in that part. So having those 11 players that are strength 3+ is going to allow you the flexibility on defense to choose who and where you want to be vulnerable. You can obviously juggle around if you want. I like having the halflings there. You've got a couple of linemen spare as well. Giving them block is just going to make them more resilient on the line of scrimmage. You could take wrestle instead, but if you've got a free single lying around, kick will be really useful for this team, either to pin your opponent deep and allow the relatively strong front line of this team. So Ogre / Tree, you've got a couple of blitzers, you've got a Frenzy Slayer, you know, you've got some blockers with Brawler. You can do some serious damage if they are in the backfield, bringing it forward, or you can kick it close and use halflings, perhaps one with break tackle, to just run through and steal the ball, or at least just pressure that ball. If you're going to force your opponent to spend the majority of his actions securing the ball and falling away from your line of scrimmage, it's going to mean that you get the numbers advantage, can then conquer the line of scrimmage, and then you've created your opponent 2 different pockets of team, and yeah, they might still score, but they're going to lose a couple of players from your big guys doing it. So that's kind of the primary vanilla option for Old World Alliance, but we've got some cool star players for them as well. We're going to jump in here with Carla Von Kill. Now the reason we're going for Carla Von Kill is because if you take Carla with this roster using the Ogre, it maxes out at 1195. So we've talked in a couple of these rosters about there's like a bunch of star players that are all around the same price. So Carla and the White Dwarf are 210. Grim is 200 and Zug is 220. So Carla Von Kill sits at 210. If you want to take Zug, you have to take the Tree, not the Ogre, or play with some other costings. I like Carla in this roster, and the reason for that is you get Strength 4 Blodger. Let's ignore everything else that Carla does great. She's got a cool Dauntless ability. You get a Strength 4 Blodger. So let's look at the Ogre roster, or the Tree roster here, doesn't really matter. Ogre / Tree, Blitzer, Thrower, Slayer, Dwarf Blitzer, 2 Dwarf Blockers, 2 Halflings, 3 Linemen. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players, including Carla. So you are a little more vulnerable when it comes to bench. Actually, your 12th and 13th player are both the Halflings. So it's entirely up to you when you bring them on. You can bring them on as a fowler in this situation, or you can just bring them on if you want to throw teammate. Or, quite frankly, when you start to suffer some casualties, you can bring the halfling on and it's going to be absolutely fine. So the cool thing about this roster is you get everything that we just talked about, kind of. You have to lose a few key positionals. You got no catcher, which isn't the end of the world. There is definitely a way you can play with the cost here. You could even, if you're taking the Tree, you can actually splash out and upgrade alignment to a catcher. It's up to you whether you want that speed over strength. That's the cool thing about OWA, is you've got the balance there. You can go with consistency and strength, or you can go with dodginess. It's really interesting middle ground. Carla, however, will unlock this roster. You've got a human blitzer, you've got a dwarf blitzer, you've got a human thrower. These are really good players. The Ogre's not bad, and Carla is phenomenally good. So you can do an absolute ton of stuff, and Carla is just going to be another player that does great. Movement 6, Strength 4, Agility 3+, Passing 4+, Armor 9+, Block, Dauntless, Dodge, Jump Up, Loner, and once per game, if you successfully roll Dauntless, she triples the Strength, so you get 3 dice with her. It's just an absolute power-up. The problem with this roster is that it feels like Carla and a whole bunch of ragtag stuff. But if that's your downside, I'm really okay with it. But if we're going to be running a star player and a bunch of random stuff, then why don't we go straight to the top? We're looking at Griff now, 1170. You kind of have to give up quite a lot of the OWA team here, but you end up with Griff, an Ogre, the human blitzer, the human thrower, the dwarf blitzer, 2 dwarf blockers, 2 halflings, and 3 linemen. With your 2 rerolls, again, consider leader for the third one. It's not significantly worse. You're missing the slayer, you're missing the catcher, so you're missing a bit of punch and a bit of score. But you know what? Griff more than makes up for that. So Griff is an absolute beast. Movement 7, strength 4, agility 2+. So he's getting that ball. He's getting out of dodge when he needs to. Passing 3+. Armor 9+, so he's sticking around. Block, dodge, fend, loner 3+, because he is a pro. Sprint and sure feet, which means he's reasonably movement 10 most of the time. And once per game, he just gets to roll a dice because he's Griff. So this roster is very similar to the Carla one in that it becomes Griff plus OWA. So if you are looking for a player experience that is more akin to putting Lord of the Rings on the Blood Bowl pitch, you've got a bunch of disparate guys. Lord of the Rings are a fantasy version of Gaunt's Ghosts. You've just got a bunch of hodgepodge bits. I don't know, maybe your model collection got ransacked. Maybe you bought a puppy and it ate most of your teams. You're going to end up with bits and bobs left over, and quite frankly, Gryphon Co. build here. You're going to win. It's going to be a play experience that you've not experienced before, and that in itself is probably worth running it for. And my last pick for Old World Alliance is, unsurprisingly, Gryphon Crumbleberry. So with this build, it comes in at 1185, which means without having to downgrade one of your other positionals or losing a player, you can only take the tree, but that's okay because Grak is the ogre. So you can take a double ogre build, that's absolutely fine, but I like the tree here. So you get Grak and Crumbleberry, we'll talk about them in a minute. Tree man. You get the blitzer, you get the thrower, you get the catcher, so you still have an extra bit of scoring ability. You get 1 dwarf blitzer, so no slayer here. You get the 2 dwarf blockers, who can help fulfill the role of being your line, 2 halflings, and 3 linemen. 2 rerolls again, talking about leader for that third reroll from the human thrower. So what do you get in this roster? You get 2 halflings plus another halfling, and that halfling has sure hands. So you get a very heavy stunty feel. You get a tree to throw and a Grak to kick. So you can kind of go all in on the stunty nonsense. But let's say you're actually playing OWA because you like a different playstyle and a different challenge. This will ramp that up. This gives you the opportunity to have the tree and the ogre on the pitch at the same time. Let's ignore the stunties completely, because with Grak, tree, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the blitzer and the thrower, 5, 6 for the catcher and the blitzer, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 with the 2 blockers and 3 linemen. So all of your halflings are off the pitch. You end up with an ogre, a tree man, a blitzer, a thrower, a catcher, another blitzer, 2 dwarf blockers, and a bunch of human linemen. That is a really interesting team, and you've got the tree on the line to just take those blocks, and you've got Grak and 2 blitzers to be able to blitz wherever you want. This team is going to do some serious maiming, and on top of that, you've got a couple of halflings that you can throw away to use as ammunition or as a foul caddy to just run around. Maybe chuck double on there, get dirty player on one of your halflings, and he can just run around following up your big guys, just putting the boot into anybody that they fell to the ground. This roster is an absolute ton of fun. And quite frankly, you can just drop a halfling and upgrade the tree to the ogre if you want to dual wield ogres. That doesn't sound bad, does it? So the really cool thing about the old world, the OWA, is that you get a huge amount of variety, but hopefully you can see that there is a core part of the team, which is the trilogy of human players. It avoids animosity and maximizes their skills. Add into that, you got a dwarf contingent, which really breaks into 2 parts. So the 2 blockers just helping your front line be better, and then you've got the blitzer and the slayer who can run around either being guard support or just maiming on their own. You've got halflings who can run around and foul or just be throw teammate, and you've got a selection of star players that will, added to your big guy, just allow you to dominate on the board. This is certainly not one of the strongest teams we've looked at because they've got quite a lot of downsides. But if you're a painter, you are going to be hard pressed to find a team that looks this great. Now, I have actually started putting together pieces for my team. So I've got my Fanath dwarfs here. I've ordered some bases so that they can look like they're dungeoning. And what I'm going to do is use my Fanath dwarfs mixed in with the Imperial Nobility team to represent my human players, because they've kind of got a similar kind of style. And I'll be using the Death Roller as the ogre so that I can actually use the Death Roller, because unfortunately it is a little bit unplayable. And it's going to give me a very unique team. with a very unique playstyle. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up for the Old World Alliance rosters. Please let me know what you think of this team in Blood Bowl 2020 and any other rosters you've brewed up for it, or some star players that I've not talked about. And I'm going to wrap up. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll be back again soon for more Blood Bowl content.